Stephen Bochco, the legendary television producer, said to me at some point, 2% of zero is zero. They can't say no to that. Well, they could say no to that. We put reasonable demands on the table without being unduly oppressive to management, and management simply refused to bargain. They refused to move. We clearly said to them that if you do not meet them, we will stop working. We will put our pencils down. And we did.
Good afternoon. The Board of Directors of the Writers Guild of America West and the Council of the Writers Guild of America East, acting upon the authority granted them by the memberships, have voted unanimously to call a strike effective 12:01 a.m. Monday, November 5th.
Patrick said this is not a decision we take lightly. In fact, we make it with great sadness and reluctance. There is still time and a deal to be made before this strike begins. We urge the studios and the networks to come back and bargain fairly. Thank you.
What you're doing here is working. These companies can't survive without us for long. Even though it often seems as if their attitude is, you know, if we could just get rid of all these damn writers, actors, and directors, we could actually run a studio here. Now, I won't demonize an entire studio, because I do know a lot of good, decent people right here at Fox who feel helpless themselves right now. They want a quick end to this thing just like we do. And I do look forward to working with them again when this is over and we're all awkwardly pretending like it never happened.
The moment that may have ended my career, or at least the kind of productive career I had, was the big meeting over at 20th Century Fox.
We thank you from the bottom of our collective heart for bravely manning the front lines in this battle we're all waging to get fair participation in the enormous profits our work generates.
Those were heady days during the strike. That was a wonderful feeling. I felt it strongly. It felt like the 60s to me again. I'm standing backstage and Jesse Jackson spoke.
It is your right to share in the growth of your own industry.
Rage Against the Machine played.
There's a thundercloud exploding. I'm free at last.
Pam Fair, who was my handler basically, the union, a very good friend of mine from our staff, a great writer, had written a speech for me to give, and I said, you know, I want to do this one from the heart.
I've heard one phrase over and over again, ad nauseum. It's nobody wants a strike. I never hear it from actors and directors and writers. Because we know, we understand the sacrifice. We understand the responsibility. They worry about profit margins. We worry about paying the bills.
And I got up there and gave a pretty radical speech.
And I always respond, no shit.
And when I watched it over and over again on YouTube later, I said, Les isn't going to like this. Les isn't going to consider me a great friend anymore. When I heard myself say the lines over and over again.
There is no question we occupy the moral high ground. But another thing I've learned the last 2 years, that morality doesn't play in the House of Greed.
I said, maybe I went over the top a little bit then.
Fairness, fair play, justice doesn't pertain in bargaining. What matters is leverage. And here's your leverage right here.
But I could have been a little more judicious with the way I spoke at some of those meetings, and I regret it a little bit. But we're on the right side of things.
There were great people in this industry at different points that were wise and believed in the industry. People who are the heads of major companies who have a passion for the workers and a passion for the content. Nowadays, most of Hollywood is owned by major media conglomerates, and those people aren't even in Hollywood. They're in New York, or sometimes they're even in other countries. And the AMPTP is not the studios, it's not the producers, it's lawyers for major companies.
I certainly was talking to CEOs, and Nick countered all the way through this, so I have things I've never told anybody.
Nick Counter was the Alliance's hired gun and had been for many, many years. And Nick Counter was clearly and completely and totally in their clutch.
CEOs don't want to deal with unions. This is the least sexy part of their job. Nick Counter was very good at keeping them away because they tend to make concessions that they can't really back up or that they shouldn't. Nick was the man that they all counted on to do all of the negotiating for them.
One of the real strokes of brilliance of Nick Counter was getting all of the entertainment industry companies to band together for negotiating purposes. He did it so well that that seemed, after a while, to be the natural order of things.
And it is so bizarre the way pattern bargaining works the opposite way it would work in any other industry.
What happens is the crafts, the various unions, they get together and they go to a single factory.
The UAW can negotiate against GM, against Chrysler, against Ford. It can go on strike against GM and say, by the way, your two major competitors are still working while you're on strike. There's a tremendous amount of leverage there.
In the entertainment industry, the opposite happens. The companies are organized and they find the union willing to make the easiest deal and then move on to the next one.
Instead of all of the guilds working together, it's essentially the AMPTP pitting the other guilds against each other.
Nick Counter insisted that all the unions engage in pattern bargaining. Whatever the DGA got, the WGA got, the SAG got. And I never thought that was a great idea for anybody. Many times the DGA would come in and give them a low ball deal. Nick Counter said, you unions can't talk to each other about negotiations. You can't share information, you can't strategize together, because that would be collusion. We went on a year-and-a-half search to find an executive director, and we found Doug Allen. The first day Doug came to work, I said, Doug, tell me something. I've always heard that we can't talk to the DGA, the WGA about negotiations because that would be collusion. Is that true? He said, Allen. He said, labor unions are exempt from collusion laws. He said, you can talk to whoever you want. He said, employers are supposed to abide by those laws, but they never do. I said, you're kidding me. So for 30 years, with our huge legal staffs at all three unions, we've just been abiding by this bullshit conceit and not talking to each other. So for the first time ever in 30 years, we started making appointments at sets through, leading up to the WGA negotiation.
Well, I really believe that Nick Counter never thought the writers were going to walk out.
And in fact, one of Nick Counter's early statements was, they're going to go on strike, let them, and they'll feel the pain of not working.
Ultimately, he didn't have to start this strike. He really didn't. But he came from such an old union-busting place that he didn't understand ultimately how reasonable our demands were.
I think again and again of that line that's from The Usual Suspects, written by Chris McQuarrie. The greatest trick the devil pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. The greatest trick that Nick Counter ever pulled was convincing the world that one united industry group to negotiate union by separate union was the natural order of things.
What was so interesting about this last strike is Hollywood finally learned something about union organization from the major blue-collar union movement.
The difference this time was we had people like Jeff Herman and David Young who came out of a strong trade union background. And they were determined to do away with this more sort of wishy-washy attitude. And they were the ones who organized this. And they were the ones who had the big rallies, which created a great sense of community among writers.
Brothers and sisters, it's time for us to take a stand. I'm here to tell you today on day 5, we are winning this strike. Let me hear you.
He cared about the union, first and foremost.
David Young was a brilliant strategist, and it came in with a totally different model of how to think about work in this industry. Before he started working at the Writers Guild, he was working for construction workers, and he was working for garment workers, and then he comes to Hollywood.
Every time there's a new technology, it's unfathomable for them. They don't know what the business model is. Was there a business model for VCR and DVD? Was there a business model for reality television? Was there a business model for basic cable? Is there a business model for the internet?
Passion for unions. That's what he bought. And a sense of community. He created a community where none had existed. And that is a substantial accomplishment.
For him, work is work, and labor issues are labor issues. And it's not so much about the glamour of Hollywood and the glitz of Hollywood and, oh, we're creatives. It's about getting the best contract for the workers that he works for.
It's our goal today. It'll be our goal tomorrow. It will be our goal every day, and that's where our focus will be as executive director and with the negotiating committee until we bring you back a fair contract.
Writers, screenwriters, television writers, movie writers, radio writers, certainly novelists, poets, journalists. We help shape this culture. We help give voice to what's inside people who don't know how to articulate or access that voice or give them permission to have that voice.
It's writers who drive the zeitgeist, really. We're the first ones that are usually on the front lines of whatever trend there is in society. You think of Matthew Weiner in Mad Men. He's affected fashion. He's affected the way that we look at men back in the 60s. He created a whole language, really, and a whole way to look at advertising and business that didn't exist. Modern Family, when you look at that, what that's done, I would say, even for people looking at gay marriage differently, because it just showed a loving couple who were raising a daughter together. It normalized it. It made it part of America, it made it part of the American family. I firmly believe as writers that we have a huge effect on this country.
We purify the language of the tribe. We take the stories of our time, and we, because we work real hard and because we have a calling for it at our best, tell those stories that need to be told. We're the only people who start with nothing. If you're a property master, that's a really tough job and a really demanding job, but somebody has written, Red Telephone.
If you got gumption, you get into it and you do your job. If you're a writer, even if you're telling a multiple universe story full of young adult vampires fucking each other, all the crap that you people are reading today, even if you're doing that, tell the truth. Always tell the fucking truth.
The companies wanted us to make content for free, sort of the way you get a sample or a coupon for a sample in the mail. It was supposed to be free to the consumer. Ultimately, however, it was meant to make them money, and very quickly they developed a business model where not only was it not a sample, but they made money off the original content and the derivative content. 2006, 2007, these issues came to a head. The Writers Guild was in the paddock for our negotiation. We had a contract expiring in November of 2007.
In the run-up to the strike, we had meeting after meeting after meeting at people's houses. And the format of the meeting was, we want to represent you. What's important to you? What do you care about?
The CEOs could have made it easier by saying the sort of formulas we have for DVD or that they're already established, we'll just roll this over into the internet. And in fact, a lot of writers thought that was the case. Even a lot of people on the negotiating committee, when they found out that we weren't covered, were shocked. And they could have said, all right, look, let's just sit down and negotiate this. Let's do this. I think there would not have been a strike.
It comes down to whether or not you've got the power to ask for something, and if the other side has the financial wherewithal to give it. And in the entertainment industry, certainly in 2007, we had a modicum of power, or at least we were trying to develop that power. They certainly had the money and the wherewithal financially to be able to pay it.
We anticipated back and forth trading and that it would ultimately end in a contract. But when we made a move and they made no move, that signaled, oh God, this is the same old thing that they've been doing to us in the past. So whatever unmilitant people we had in the negotiating committee at that point became pretty hardened.
I'd never believed they'd go on strike, to tell you the truth. I really didn't. I thought something would be worked out.
You know, up until that moment, I had no sense that it was heading towards a strike. You never want to get to that position. But the strike threat is a powerful tool, and it's what gives the union the leverage.
I was asked by Patrick Verone, the president of the Writers Guild, to be a strike captain. So I had a group of, I think we were 10 to 15, and we took the early shift at Paramount, and we marched in circles. And as I've said, you don't really understand the American labor movement until you've walked in circles on the picket line.
The notion was that the strike captains would essentially have a team of people and our job was to be in very close communication with them, trying to hear from them, their feelings, their frustrations, communicating to them the information we got from negotiations.
If I could have your attention really quick, we're gonna move you guys over to the Numbers base camp where we can picket, hand out flyers, talk to people about why we're doing this. A couple of us are gonna stay here. We're gonna watch what goes on as they set up, and when we need you, we'll call you to come over here, and then we'll picket their chute.
And then I'm gonna go get a map from the car, and then we're gonna just roll with that, okay? And try and find them straight up. More upset with, well, we're only upsetting the people we want to upset.
It ended up being this little community of people, really. During that time period, you felt sort of attached to. And then what was wonderful about it, actually, was I got to meet all these people that, complete strangers, but became friends and colleagues, and all these people whose paths would never have crossed otherwise.
We are making our presence felt here. They're all very, freaked out that we found them, that we're not just kind of staying at home or just going to location or, studio pickets. So they are going to move to a different location in a little bit to shoot, and that's where we'll go and we'll try and negotiate a work stoppage. But for right now, keep doing what we're doing because it is having an effect. All right.
They gave me a list of names and said, call these people up. They all live somewhat near Paramount. And what impressed me about my group was that it was almost uniformly the more successful the writer, the faster the response and the more likely they were to say, yes, I will be there.
We decided to load the negotiating committee up with a bunch of sort of blue ribbon writers, television showrunners, very, very prominent feature writers. And the idea was twofold. One was very tactical. I remember once reading that somebody had asked Robert Kennedy when he was Attorney General why he didn't fire J. Edgar Hoover. And he said, better to have him inside the tent pissing out than outside pissing in. And the second reason is we wanted the companies to look across the table and realize that absent the people who were looking them in the eye, they wouldn't have a business.
And these are, we're talking big names here, the likes of Stephen Bochco, Tim Kring, who created Heroes. These were guys who spent all of their time running shows and not a lot of time paying attention to the Writers Guild. Yet they had pensions, they had health insurance, they got residuals, they got profit participation.
It was also a way of saying to the studios and networks, to quote Johnny Rotten from God Save the Queen, we mean it, man.
Most people's conversations about media are about the content of media. Most people are interested in stories. Some of the most exciting issues right now are actually about ownership, policy, regulation. If we want to know what's coming up next, it has much more to do with who owns it and what they want to give to people.
Management has always hated the idea of having to give writers anything other than upfront money.
This is really at the core of what the strike was about. When a writer writes a project, they have copyright, and that's something guaranteed by the United States Constitution.
When you write a novel, theater, music, what you get paid up front is what you get paid up front. The amount that you will get beyond that is dependent upon the success or failure of the product that you've created.
In the entertainment industry, we don't have copyright. Copyright is owned by the studios or the producer.
Playwrights, when they put on a play, they maintain their copyright. Book authors, when they write their books, they maintain their copyright. But I, as the screenwriter, sell my copyright to the studios.
The dreaded home video formula was an issue that cast a shadow over the strike.
DVD residual rate is the worst one that the writers have, and that was because we lost that strike.
ABC decided to say, we're going to consider this home video. And home video had 25 years of bad will among writers and directors.
The formula is a percentage of gross, but there's a wrinkle. Before you calculate the formula, 80% of the money is swept off the table. So you just take 20% of what the studio got on home video and then apply a residuals formula to that.
The company's argument has been, this is unknown territory. We don't know how we're going to make money. We don't know when we're going to make money.
When home video first came about, and we're talking video cassettes, physically building a video cassette, threading the tape and screwing the thing together and all that was expensive. And these cassettes sold for 99 bucks typically. So the idea of taking that 80% away was to account for the studio's manufacturing costs.
Why don't you guys make a low deal or no deal at all, and then when the time comes, then we'll make it worth your while. And inevitably then, when they did have a business model, it became too late for them to change that business model to cut in the talent.
As home video evolved, it became a larger and larger part of the revenue. When DVD came along, and now Blu-ray, the cost of physically manufacturing a DVD or Blu-ray disc is well under $1. And yet, this 80% of revenue is still swept off the table. The 20% formula still applies.
If I write a movie, you buy the DVD, I would actually make more money redeeming the can of Coke that I was drinking while you bought the DVD.
If there had been acknowledgement on the part of the studios that money would be owed.
I'd gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
There are some people in the labor community who believe that the studios made a promise of some sort that the formula would change as the home video industry did. It's not clear that that's true.
We were not about to be fooled this time. What we're asking for is a percentage of revenue. If you make money, we make money.
The Guild history has sort of taught us is that for each of these sort of big leaps forward, there was a strike, there was a fight. And this was really the fight for new media.
In the beginning of moving pictures, the first people to come were the engineers and the technicians. And so the early films were all the product of Edison and these engineers and technicians. The artists came later, and that's when the art of movies really blossomed. In the same way, the internet started by engineers and technicians. 100 years ago, one of the most popular Nickelodeon features was like man sneezing, and that the most watched internet video 100 years later was panda sneezing, and it was very, very analogous.
Apple's iTunes, where you could download the show and watch it on your iPod for $1.99, which was, you know, absolutely revolutionary in the time. That was 2005. Disney was the first to dive into the deep end and license some of its big shows, Grey's Anatomy, Lost.
The first thing that we heard about was Apple TV and iTunes streaming and selling existing content, TV show and films that people could buy online, for which we didn't have a residual.
The NBC comedy The Office started to really rack up big numbers on iTunes downloads. Writers and their representatives and, you know, people were like, this is a new platform for exhibition. There's an advertisement attached to this. Somebody's making money.
The internet offers this incredible opportunity to reinvent how we do everything.
Netflix was a mail order home video service, and I dare say nobody could have seen the growth of streaming video and the growth that would be so fast that Netflix would go from writing some big checks to Hollywood to be able to run shows on their streaming platform to commissioning their own shows with, you know, Academy Award nominated directors that would go on to win Emmy Awards.
It starts with the writers. They write fade in, and it all starts there, and it's a shame that it doesn't also end there and go back down to dictate.
Cooperation amongst unions was certainly a technique that we employed at the Screen Actors Guild, was vital to making the Writers Guilds more powerful, both at the bargaining table and on the picket line.
The issues of this strike are the same ones for every creative union out here. Our industry is going into a brave new world of new media. We've got to figure out the formulas. We've got to figure out how to compensate the creative unions. The Writers Guild is the tip of an arrow, and if they do not penetrate on this issue is going to go away for a long time, and people are really going to suffer.
As one of the SAG members who was just here said, we're next.
Yeah, and us actors, you know what we are? Speechless.
This contract is probably going to be the model for all the other contracts for the actors and the directors, and it's just important that we show a unified front and show that we're not going to put up with it.
Our sense was we need to make sure that the Screen Actors Guild and the Directors Guild and even the below-the-line unions, including the Teamsters and the IATSE, the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, that they were aware and engaged in what we were doing. When the time came, we were the only ones who actually had a contract that was expiring, so we were the only ones who could go out on strike.
Edie McClurg here, and I'm supporting the Writers Guild of America strike because the actors and the directors will be coming up later, and we all need to get online with this sharing the wealth from DVDs and the internet.
This is all about profits. This is not about salaries. This is not about $20 million paydays at the start of a movie or a TV show. It's about profit participation.
What was nice and encouraging and a morale builder for our members was that a lot of the actors during their lunch hour or after hours would come out to the picket line and would join us and would show their support. And so it was important to us to have the Screen Actors Guild behind us, and they were and continue to be, you know, an ally for us.
David and Patrick and Doug and I went and we talked to actors, writers, showrunners together. And that's one reason there was such solidarity leading up to the WGA strike. One of the saddest things about all this to me was that the actors came out in droves and supported the writers, but they wouldn't support their own union when it came time for our negotiation, which is truly sad.
The story of Hollywood is a story of entrepreneurs. The question is, who gets to be the entrepreneur? Who is the leader? Is it the filmmaker? Is it the person who runs the studio? Is it the star? All of those people have an entrepreneurial spirit in some way and a desire to get in front of a huge number of people and tell extraordinary stories and make a lot of money. Who makes the most money and who is most beloved, either in front of or behind the camera, is complicated.
I'd always loved movies. I'd gone to 2 or 3 or 4 a day. I wanted to see every movie ever made. Movies were kind of my interior life. The way I knew I sort of felt an emotion is if I could find a movie scene that emotion occurred in, then yeah, I could feel that.
I knew I wanted to be a screenwriter since I was 19. I moved to Hollywood when I was 21. I'd written 3 scripts. I got signed to William Morris right away, so I was like a hot shot for like a second, right? Made it. I had a lot of development deals. I never got famous as a screenwriter in Hollywood. Out of everything, I had got one thing made. Wound up going to Paramount TV, where it got rewritten by the director. I think that had 1 line of dialogue left by the time it was done.
As a famous director was once called on saying, "I'm the brains of this operation. I'm the creator. I'm the architect." He said it. Famous director. And a writer said, "No, I'm the architect. You're the carpenter." And the director went ballistic.
Though I have a great deal of respect for the current CEOs, they're very removed from the day-to-day business of entertainment, as opposed to a generation ago of moguls. Louis B. Mayer was right there, casting people. So the idea that you're supporting your whole community by making sure that they stay alive isn't there anymore.
In March of 1933, Louis B. Mayer calls together all the directors, writers, actors, and says, we're going down. MGM isn't making money. The Depression has finally hit us. And unless everyone takes a pay cut, MGM is going to disappear. There were, a couple rumblings in the crowd of saying, I don't know if that's really true. One of the child actors in the crowd says, I'll take the pay cut, and all these people start crying. And then one of the oldest actors, May Robeson, stands up and she says, I'll take the pay cut, Mr. Mayor. And then everybody's sobbing and they're saying, yes, we will take the pay cut. We will save MGM. The reality is the writers, the directors, the actors all realize that they've all taken a 50% pay cut, but there's two groups of people in Hollywood who haven't taken this pay cut. The moguls, the bigwig producers, and all of the below-the-line workers that work for IATSE, for the IA. And the reason why the IA people didn't take that pay cut is because they had a contract. And so the writers, the directors, the actors realized at this moment that they've totally been suckered by a story. And they bought into Louis B. Mayer's tale of the death of Hollywood. And in fact, they took this pay cut they didn't have to, and if they would have been unionized, this all would have been negotiated for them. And that was 1933 that the Writers Guild first decided to form as a union, but it took another 9 years before they got their first contract.
The Writers Guild is set up to handle your career whether you're at the very beginning, or if you're Steven Spielberg and you're doing your $100 million movie, it can be there for you too. And what an amazing organization.
I feel absolute loyalty to it, and I know what it's done for me. When I retire, it's really because of a pension that was negotiated for me 40 years ago. Not because of anything that I did. It's because of the Guild and the power that it has.
The Writers Guild makes it possible to make a career out of this job, instead of it being something that you were lucky enough to do for a few years. Guaranteeing a certain standard of living to the people who do the job, they take away the incentive of a company to let somebody go once they reach a certain point and replace them with somebody who's going to be a lot cheaper.
I love the Writers Guild, and I'll tell you why. After I wrote that TV movie, after it aired, I never got a residual. So I contacted the Guild, and they basically made a couple of phone calls and got me a check for $17,000. So when anyone asked me about the Writers Guild and what's so great about the Writers Guild, I go, $17,000, dude, that I would never have gotten if the Guild hadn't flexed a little muscle and got me what I deserved.
You would be abused and at the whim of powerful CEOs if you didn't have a union or a Guild behind you. I couldn't be in this business without the Guild.
You take individual writer by individual writer, they can be crushed and bent, but you put them together and you form a union, and we've got some strength.
The Writers Guild originally formed in 1920. It was known as the Writers. They had a club, actually, that was on Sunset Boulevard. And a lot of those Eastern writers were the people that really helped the Guild form in some ways. So even though Hollywood was this amusing thing where they made tons of money quickly, they didn't like the idea that they were not owners. They saw themselves as workers, whereas a lot of the Hollywood people wanted to believe that they were creatives. That, to me, is what's so interesting about this moment is, what does it mean to be a worker in a moment where you're supposed to have a career?
Now, during the 50s, my career slowly began to develop. And all of a sudden, we hear that something like going on a strike in 1960. Well, who the hell wanted to strike? A strike for what? 3 men got up. Val Davies, Jim Webb, and Mel Shavelson. Now, these are all top screenwriters. Between them, they had about 6 or 7 Academy Awards or nominations. And I remember I got up and I said, why are you for this strike? You don't need a strike. What's in it for you? And they said, it's our responsibility to help you today to fight the war for yourselves that you cannot fight, that we can fight for you, as it will be your responsibility one day to fight for others coming behind you, which is what happened in 1980.
By 85, I think that they thought, okay, this is the moment in the sun here. The Writers Guild's gonna bring unionism back on track here. And I think that was an underlying factor. I could be wrong, but that's how it looked from where I was sitting in the aisle, okay? There was a group called the Union Blues that started. Actually, I was a member of that, and it was not popular. And these were all big writers, big houses, big money, and I was living in a bungalow on Formosa Avenue in Hollywood, for crying out loud. These guys presented the situation in a way that made sense to me. They said, look, you know, we cannot win this strike. This is an unwinnable strike. Even if we go out on strike and try and get this cassette royalty, studio's never going to change their definition. And if you look at the definition the way it plays out, they're just going to create their own sub-distributor. And I realized it's like, this is a no-win. Why am I going to go on strike for that? The only way that strike would win is if we were willing to go on a long strike. And in 1985, people were not really willing. They weren't really behind it. Like when we get to 88, was another story. And I was actually part of organizing and trying to get proxy votes and trying to vote this up and trying to get Naomi Gurian to publicly explain what their position was and what deal was she trying to bring back.
They didn't believe us for a second that we were going to go on a strike, and we did. They didn't think we would last, and we did. This is our last and final offer, they would tell us. And of course, we turned it down. What happened was the board of directors would accept a contract. The negotiating committee said, we don't like this contract, we hate it. And we went with a negotiating committee and eventually impeached the board and threw them all out.
We have this 85 strike. Did we win that strike or lose that strike? You know, people will say, well, we got screwed, we rolled over, we gave up all these rights, but when you look at what we gave up and you look at what was already in the contract, we weren't gonna win that stuff unless we were willing to go on strike and really go for it. And we weren't. We weren't that organized then. And there was a meeting with the same Union Blues people, and I went to that meeting, and I went to one meeting, and I said, you guys are out of touch. I said, there's gonna be a long strike. The networks and the studios are actually trying to roll back real things now. You have to understand you are viewed as fat cats that don't care, that will go financial core because you're selfish, because you just want what you want. I said that may not be true, and there may be genuine interests where you do care about the guild, but that's the perception. And as we know, politics is about perception. I don't think the point of the union is to have a strike. The point of the union is to get viable results for their membership. And so in '85, what happened was it was a short-lived strike. There was a lot of division, there was a lot of contention, and then there were people that thought me and other people should be indicted for you know, undermining the union. And it was like, you know what? This is America, this is democracy. We have room for both sides.
The writers went to the new media and played with new media, and in the same way kind of showed the potential of new media in the process of organizing fans.
I'm a Firefly fan and a fan of Joss Whedon and all of his shows. Because the writers provide the entertainment that I enjoy watching so much.
I think it's only right. They are part of this creative process, and that they actually see something from that they actually get a portion of the proceeds from that work.
Just on a personal note, I found that I had a lot of skill sets that were dormant up until that moment because the sector didn't exist yet. There hadn't been an entertainment labor action with the internet. So the way we could communicate with each other and the way we could get the message out was extraordinary. When you're on strike against the media companies that control the media, it's pretty difficult to get that point of view out, you know, from the people who are taking the labor action.
I mean, we were looking to win the internet, and so we started using the internet. Screenwriters began making short films, which had a lot of very positive effect. Chief among them, we were able to get our message out, which is also good because in an industry where the media is owned by our bosses, it's very hard to get your message out using conventional methods. We had a rally in Century City with about 4,000 people attending that got no coverage on the news. They didn't want to give any kind of publicity to the Writers Guild strike. Despite that, we were able to use the internet, we were able to use new media to get our message out there. Most of these videos are still available on YouTube for people to look back as historic documents.
Our head writer and some of our writers, Steve Bodo and Tim Carvel in particular, thought, hey, let's make basically a little Daily Show piece about it, because the Daily Show is sort of a vehicle for explaining complicated things in an accessible way. Steve sort of headed up a outside the house Daily Show piece. We were submitting jokes to him, and he was compiling a script. Tim was finding video resources, I don't even know where. So we shot it at a little card table.
It's about whether writers should get paid when media companies make money using their work online. Writers think they should get paid. Corporations think the writers should go till they're herpes in their nasal passages.
And within a few days, it had hundreds of thousands of hits.
75 years ago, almost to the day, 10 screenwriters met at the Knickerbocker Hotel. They met with the intention of forming a screenwriters guild. They wanted to form a union with teeth.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Alicia Keys, and I want you to know that I am a writer.
Leo Reed and myself are out here today to support the WGA in solidarity. Their fight is our fight. We're out here to show the AMPTP and the rest of the world that the Teamsters are not afraid to stand up to adversity and support our brothers and sisters when the time arises.
Hollywood is a place that is at once an ideal and a neighborhood. So it is fitting today that you're in the neighborhood that gave this industry its name. History is made here every single day by you. But when there is no work, there is no history. When there is no work, there is no justice. So for the florists and the restaurants and the grips and the gappers and the support staff, all the people who are not working today, I think it's time to put them back to work, don't you?
I was advised by my attorneys to be careful what I say. Shit. I mean, this is bullshit. Listen, when you negotiate a contract, they don't care how much you justify your cause. They don't care how much you articulate your cause. They really don't care about sharing the profits of the new media. They don't care about playing fair. The only thing they care about is getting kicked in their damn asses. That's all they care about. And you can and you will.
The middle class everywhere is under siege. An executive in our own business was recently fired and received $82 million in severance pay. And they accused us of greed, and they forced us to strike. We're asking to be protected in the future. Here's an interesting statistic for you all. Did you know that members of our guild wrote something like 100% of the movies that went on to win Oscars? We did that. We are your partners, and together, we will conquer the internet, just like we did the talkies. Show some soul, we'll show some flexibility. Let's get this done by Christmas.
So in case you didn't hear, we're going back to the table on Monday.
We were warned by Sterling Sullivan. They'll cheat you, they'll give you false figures. Well, no, the royalty plan's great. We get percentage of the profits. There were no percentage of the profits. There were no profits, as we were told.
Everybody I know who has ever had an auditor go in and look for money has found that they were owed far, far more than they were paid.
Now, net profits is a dirty word in Hollywood. There's no dirtier word except perhaps casting couch. That's because net profits usually amount to zero.
The first thing that they did was say, we won't give you any residuals until individual projects are in profit. And that was a new demand to us, and that was something that we were utterly opposed to, and that's what they came to us with. And we also knew through back channels that they were serious.
I have friends who've worked on The Simpsons from day one. It has yet to turn a profit.
One of our negotiating committee had written Men in Black, and he kept getting statements saying that they were actually doing worse than before the movie was even made.
They're going to behave like companies. They're run by people who have a fiduciary duty to shareholders to maximize profits in any way possible.
That this was something that a couple of executives in particular considered their baby, this notion that nobody gets any money from a DVD or from a VHS sale until the entire project is in profitability.
They moved off of that before the negotiations broke down, but there was a sense that they weren't going to give us anything.
And what they don't say is they don't like paying on their winners either. They don't like paying.
I'm involved in deals at studios and networks where we have to sue to get statements
to get paid, you have to hire forensic accountants and lawyers just to get going.
That seems to recommend pretty strongly that workers should have people whose fiduciary duty it is to maximize their income. And that's pretty much what the union does for you.
New streaming media gave us insight into what it could be, but Hulu came out a month after the strike ended and really transformed the way people tune into regularly programmed content.
Artists who can now make their movies and TV shows and make them at a huge cost reduction compared to that exact same thing done through the studio system. If you run the economics of that, not good for studios and networks and really good for artists.
I think we are now seeing how important new media is. If you're looking at people who run broadcast networks saying the ability to broadcast terrestrially is the least important part of what we do. You make money on retransmission, you make money on advertising, you make money on subscription. If you're really good, you can make money on selling data about viewer demographics. There's real money in new media. Streaming is growing by 20, 30, 40% a year. The distinction between old media and new media simply isn't a distinction anymore.
My name's Patty Lynn, and I am a television writer. My latest job was I was working on a show called Breaking Bad.
You sell a feature for $50,000, that's for like a year to 2 years worth of work. That may be the only sale that you make in 4 years. So when you divide 50,000 by 4, the math, doesn't work out to be so great.
But the one thing I did write that was produced was a Spanish language sitcom for Telemundo. I got more in residuals on that than I got paid initially. It was crazy.
When I was in Albuquerque, I worked pretty much every single day for an entire month. I had one day off. It was my birthday.
So you're sitting at a computer for 12 hours a day. Like, how hard is that? But the version of like creating is tough.
We work sometimes, 12, 13-hour days, and without a break at all. And we're pussies that will back down, we won't put up a fight, we'll take anything you'll give us. I mean, that's kind of the stereotype of writers.
We're so lucky to be there. I don't have that fabulous handbag made from Orphan Babies kid. I'm pretty much your typical writer.
We don't know what the future of television is going to be. It's all in flux right now. But we need to protect ourselves for whatever future that might happen. And that's what this strike is about.
There was a misconception about who the writers are and how much money they make, and that most of them are basically just middle-class people at best.
This is my work until I get to go back to the office. Writers are just like everybody else. We have families, we have mortgages. We're like every other person on the crew, honestly.
Strike is a miserable, miserable thing, which means you are not working. It affects lives. People lost houses. I don't think anyone went into it lightly.
It's a misconception that writers are sipping drinks on the beaches of Malibu, when in fact, we've got concerns just like everyone else. It's not going to be a fun holiday for anybody this year if we're all still on strike.
The weird thing about a strike is how primitive it all gets. Suddenly there are rumors, and these rumors are flying, and they're incredibly powerful. Deadline Hollywood was, as far as I knew, that was the clearinghouse for strike information. Nikki Fink's website. If it was on there, it was real. About a month in, I'm going to say mid-December, there was a rumor that there was some backroom deal that was about to happen. According to the comments, there was a shadowy cabal of showrunners who were either really unhappy with the way the strike was going or who were going to cut their own deal or something. And I'm scrolling down in the comments, and someone says, oh, this is just, this is psychological warfare from the AMPTP. And that just sounds so over the top. And then there was a response to that comment that said, no, it's totally real. My friend's a showrunner, he was in the meeting. On Monday, we go back to scribing the shows. And I thought, what writer says scribing the shows? And I realized, oh my God, it is psychological warfare. There's not a writer in the world who would describe himself as a scribe. Have you ever met anyone? Monday came around and there was just complete crickets, nothing, no deal. The rumor was completely false. And that's when I realized that I had allowed my hopes to get up, even despite myself. And when that wasn't it, then I knew, okay, we're in it for the long haul.
Imagine the structure of entertainment from the beginning of film up until October of 2007. A studio or a network or a production company stuff makes something. They sell it. Whoever's distributing it in conjunction with this company have complete control of distribution. They can control how much people are going to pay for it. They can control how often it's going to be shown. Then 2007 comes along and the bottom of the distribution pyramid explodes.
Well, what does this mean for all of us, for the traditional ways that the Hollywood studios have made money on their TV shows, which is producing about 80 to 100 episodes of a show. A studio goes out, packages all those episodes, goes to local TV station, goes to cable channels and says, would you like to run this show on your network or on your station 5 days a week, run the reruns?
Why don't we negotiate contracts with these internet companies that then the AMPTP has to adhere to if they want to do made for new media? I mean, you just got to look at who's actually using this contract, and I think that's who you have to talk to.
I think I said it to Patrick. So why are we talking to CBS, NBC, ABC? There's going to be a whole new cast of characters out here doing new media. That's who we should be talking to, and we did.
There was no question in our mind that the internet was going to be the huge thing going forward. CEO said, how do you even know? Why do you care? There's no money in it right now. Well, no money then, but money now if you look at what Amazon and Netflix are doing.
Listen, you know what they can do now? They can take their entire pilot season and do it made for new media. I mean, winnow it down. Why are you spending this much money on this many pilots? Why don't you spend not much and then spend more here and then pick your shows up? That's what I would have done if I was running a studio and I had that made for new media contract. And then they didn't do it. And I was like, come on. Where's your bad streak? Come on, use it.
Content is still going to be something that they can control, and if they can control it, why not make it as cheaply and as union-free as possible?
They'd missed out on VHS. Remember how they fought VHS? They wanted to stop rentals of VHS, and it turned out to be their biggest profit center. Nobody really knew what it was going to be, but we decided that we were going to negotiate on the internet before it became big like VHS.
Francis Coppola had some quote 20 years ago. He was asked who he thought the next big director, the next person to make The Godfather would be. And he said that it wouldn't be a big name director. He said the next great film or the next great work of art in cinema was going to come from some little girl who found a digital camera in the street in Calcutta. He then followed it up by saying, how's she going to get it distributed? It's still within the hands of the studios and the networks. That's not the case anymore. She's still got to get the eyeballs, but it's much easier than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That was the thing that not only gave us leverage because we had the ability to break their barriers to entry, but it also gave us sort of an inspiration that we could do this without them.
If you made a bad $1,000 movie, okay, it's fine. You didn't make a bad $175 million movie. And for anyone who's been doing this for any length of time, failure is a companion of all of ours. And from each failure, those of us who intend to persist learn something.
Look, when I started, my first job was working for Roger Corman. And Roger Corman really was the capitalist. He owned the means of production, and I could not afford it. I couldn't afford the $100,000 worth of camera equipment. I couldn't afford the hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of editing equipment. On even a low-budget film, the film costs were enormous.
The camera, the crew, because it's so rare, because it's so expensive, everything around that very center part of film, which is film itself, is equally as expensive and rare, which means there's not that many people who know how to use it. The whole economy of Hollywood and how much people get paid and all of that is all based on the fundamental building blocks of the technology of filmmaking. And all of a sudden, right in the middle of the writer's strike, it was like free film.
Anyone who's got a Mac has got editing equipment.
Final Cut High Def just came online. red digital cameras.
GoPro cameras, all this little stuff, and these young kids making amazing little films. This technology that's brought this new kind of entertainment, it's still based on something written by a human being.
I think that this whole idea of dropping the barriers to entry is interesting, given that so many people are making media and everyone says you can make something on YouTube and 1 million people will watch it. But how many millions of people are out there making media that nobody's watching?
My name is Ella, and I'm making this new show. It's called Great Fire.
Most people have to spend 10 years in this industry to even get anywhere, to get their first foot in the door.
I love the democratization of communication. I adore it. And I hate the monopoly that we've existed under. Limited amount of time on networks, limited amount of time that studios would distribute programming. Now it's unlimited.
Democratization of the medium itself, shooting, editing, the building blocks of making a movie, and then the distribution model was like an atom bomb in Hollywood.
Sometimes the bomb might explode without any warning. Duck and cover.
The Guild is quite simply a lifesaver for every writer. It not only protects you and collects residuals on your work, it's an absolute vital necessity in this business when so many people have such a vested interest in taking so much away from you if they can.
And it's always for the next generation. It really is in a sense. I hear that 1/3 of the writers nowadays weren't even around in the '88 strike. But they're getting the benefit.
I think the spirit in this strike is the best spirit from the Guild that I've seen in any of the strikes I've been through.
We never got anything. Starting in from 1933, without striking, without sacrificing, without fighting for our rights, and gradually by doing this, we have over the years acquired a certain number of benefits which are all normal in a civilized world. And now we're at the point where they come to the table and they won't even talk to us about it. We don't know where our profits are coming. We have to wait a couple of years, put everything on hold. They won't even talk until the Guild took an overwhelming strike vote. So then they agreed to come back to the table. But they're still not really negotiating very much.
We should be all collaborators. As naive as it may sound, I don't see why we can't all get along.
And they say, oh, they'll find out someday what the internet distribution is worth. No, we'll take a percentage of what it's worth from the get-go. And we'll take a moderate percentage. We don't want to take your profit. We just want a piece of the action. And we'll get it. Before we're done, we will get it.
That's why I'm here today, is to support not only the Writers Guild, but all unions. I mean, we're living in a time now where people think that they can earn money off of your labor without paying you. And that is slavery.
The one thing that frustrates me is the number of people who've been laid off that aren't writers. The secretaries, the assistants, the people, they're not on strike against anybody. They're not going to get a settlement. They live paycheck to paycheck. And I really think that whatever settlement we finally arrive at, it will be a settlement we could have arrived at earlier. And so I just hope that everybody works very hard to get to that point.
You have to pay attention to what that future is going to be for you. Because if they can do it across the board, they will. I mean, greed knows no bounds. And I think you must be very mindful of where we are all at.
You got to fight through it, that's all. That's the only way anybody's ever gotten anything. How did this country get started? We fought. We had a revolution.
There's been a lot of change in unionism and how people view unionism, and you have 30 years of post-Reagan America that looks at the union as a dirty word, the U word, that is as bad as the F word. You know, I always say, hey, if you like Saturday, thank the union. You want a lunch hour? Thank the union. You want sick pay? Thank the union. You want a pension? Thank the union. And people don't understand this. They don't know where it came from. They think it's like Santa Claus.
A union, a conglomerate, a steel fist to combat the steel fist of the boss.
The workforce in the United States is certainly becoming more disparate and diversified in good ways and also in bad ways.
It's part of a greater problem of a loss of community in this country. And you could say the triumph of the libertarian philosophy is something that I consider to be a huge problem in this country right now. Or you can have Paul Ryan, quoting Ayn Rand, who is this godless Nietzschean, and he doesn't have to resign or even apologize to his fellow Christianists. Believe me, if anybody in the left came up as a Marxist, which is probably the left-wing equivalent of Ayn Rand, they would be drummed out of politics.
When I was a kid, a union man had a house, had kids in college, had a boat or a summer house. This is a good America. They're making stuff here, and they go, oh, the cost of laborers. Why don't they look at the cost of executives?
I think most workers in the United States would really benefit from having a union, someone looking out for them, and not just sort of hoping that their employer will do the right thing, because they won't.
In 1980, they had the Patco strike, okay? Most people forget about the strike. And this is when the government, if Reagan had come in and they just cut the balls out of the air traffic controllers.
This morning at 7 a.m., the union representing those who man America's air traffic control facilities called a strike. Let me make one thing plain. I respect the right of workers in the private sector to strike. Indeed, as president of my own union, I led the first strike ever called by that union. I guess I'm maybe the first one to ever hold this office who is a lifetime member of an AFL-CIO union. That I must tell those who fail to report for duty this morning, they are in violation of the law, and if they do not report for work within 48 hours, they have forfeited their jobs and will be terminated.
And then you have Continental Airlines, you have all these weird things going on. All this anti-union stuff was going on.
I think that's where it all started. And that's where, it became patriotic to oppose unions. Well, unions have been the backbone of this country. The extreme philosophy on the right, which is a libertarian philosophy, which is an anti-communitarian philosophy, which is every man for himself, has just slowly grabbed hold over time. And you could say, well, as Americans, we bear some of the blame for that. We all admire the successful CEO. We want to be that person. And I think that's great. It's a great dream. But the practical reality is there's only one of them, and there are, 200,000 people working for him who are going to stay one of the 200,000 most likely.
When you live in a country where you're not taking care of the average worker, you're not getting something to work, you are creating an unstable environment. And if you look at America today, it's as more unstable today as any time in my entire life. The division between what goes on in New York and LA, which is the same in everywhere else in the middle, in the sandwich, which is getting bigger and fatter, that is a scared bunch of people that don't know where their future is, and I understand that.
At some point, we had about 800 writers who signed cards saying they wanted to be in the Writers Guild. It was part of a movement to get coverage in reality because reality was a much bigger part of the network television lineup. Networks looked at reality and they said, wow, we can put on a show that has big ratings, big advertising, there's no actors in it, so there's no talent. We're not paying Writers Guild, we're not paying Directors Guild benefits or even salaries.
Was Rage Against the Machine unavailable? So they had to upgrade to the D. Really, really high and it's a little dice. Gonna sing a song that's not really nice. Gonna sing a song called Fuck the Bullshit. They're really, really rich and they're really fucking fat. They take all your money and smile like a cat. They dominate your world and that's not right. And they keep their receipts. Yeah, they keep the receipts. They piss it on your granny's face and they keep the receipts. And if you want to know the truth, then you must understand the lie. They're gonna gobble up your internet cream pie. If you want to know the truth, you must understand the lie. Gonna gobble up your internet cream pie.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kai Bo.
A letter was submitted to our bosses saying that we wanted to join the Writers Guild. The company that produced the show was 10 by 10 Entertainment. The letter said that, we as the writers of Top Model wanted to be represented by the Guild, and we wanted to go through a negotiation process with them to work out the terms. The response to our letter was that they sent us a letter from their attorney saying that they did not wish to go into negotiations with us. We were, stuck with the choice of either to give up and just sort of go back to work and pretend that it never happened, or to go on strike.
Both on screen and behind the scenes, reality is the most diverse segment of television. Nowhere else are people of color, women, and young artists in positions of power as writers, producers, and directors enjoying virtual creative autonomy. But I'm more concerned than ever that we are still working under exploitative and illegal conditions.
When we organized Fox for those animated series in the late 90s, I got it into my head that, well, we should also do that for some of the other animation writers, some of the reality writers, people who were doing network, primetime, quality writing, but weren't getting the benefits of the Writers Guild.
Right now, very little has changed in the industry regarding reality television. It's very, very rare that a show has any benefits, any residuals. It just doesn't happen. So reality remains ununionized.
If you're an animation writer, those are the ones that really get screwed.
In 1998, when Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, created another show called Futurama, a bunch of us were approached by organizers at the Writers Guild. We agreed. The message went to Peter Chernin that the Simpsons writers want health insurance, and it came back, they don't have it, give it to them.
I will have a friend whose name will be anonymous who made a very, very big animated movie that's been a play, that's been a lot of... There's no royalty on that.
Because we weren't part of any other union the way some of the other animated shows, I became sort of the caboose on this train at the Writers Guild that woke up to the idea of organizing new jurisdictions.
The bosses had managed to get all the animators who were writing and everybody who were story editors. They said, oh, no, they're staff. They're not right. They were doing all the writing.
It was a low point when I had a number of friends of mine call up almost crying because their deals had been reneged on, which was, they were these clauses that were invoked by management to kill all development deals, or at least development deals of writers that they didn't feel they could make money on going forward. And there were a lot of friends of mine who had recently negotiated deals that they had counted on to set them up for the next few years, and suddenly that money was gone. Just one day, that money was gone. And they were crying. I mean, they were desperate. Knowing the damage, I mean, you don't go into a strike lightly, and you anticipate the damage, and you know that it's the only way to make an advance is if there's going to be some people hurt. But experiencing it, again, is something entirely different. And there were a lot of people hurt. And when they were hurt, they let us know, and it kills you.
We were dog-tired. They had rode us hard, rode us long, and hung us up wet after having pulled us through a keyhole backwards.
There was a real sinking feeling when the companies walked out of negotiations. In The Hollywood Reporter and in Variety and the LA Times the next morning, it said that we had walked out of negotiations, which was not true.
It was a tough stretch where I was doing all kinds of things just to pay bills.
You read accounts of your own activities in the press or hear them on the radio or see them on TV, and they're lies, and you can't do anything about it.
People driving by and honking till your ears wanted to explode, and tears streaming down their eyes. And all they were asking for was recognition and fair wages, fair compensation, because some of them had perceived where it was all going.
There were other dark moments where you thought, what if they just let us hang like this? Where we're not out for a week or a month or a series of months, but we're out forever. And the industry is forever changed and forever fucked.
One of the things that we discovered during the strike and during the recession was that people were so broke that if they lived in the valley, they didn't want to spend the extra $5 on gas to get over the hill to come to our offices to get help. The Actors Fund is a national nonprofit, and we help anyone who works in the performing arts and entertainment anywhere in the country. If people need financial assistance, they have to show that they've earned money for 5 consecutive years in their craft. 2006 and 2007, we were doing about $200,000 to $300,000 a year in emergency financial assistance. 2008 hit, we jumped up to 1,550 people. We went from providing $300,000 in 2007 to $1.6 million in 2008. We couldn't have increased our financial assistance by 5 times in 6 months if people hadn't come out of the woodwork to donate. And you know, there were people who were out of work who were sending us a $20 check. That kind of stuff, you know, you just really think, wow, the world is a good place.
Go to the Sundance Festival, or if you go to Toronto, if you go to Cannes, you will see a lot of people in jackets, ties, with cell phones, and they'll walk up to you and say, hey, you've just made a movie which is small and interesting. Can I give you some money to make one which is neither?
But I'm sure there's some dementos among us here. I'm not advocating violence. I never advocate violence. But Nick Counter should be made aware that he is not dealing with people who come to them on their knees, supplicating, come back and talk to us, come back and talk to us. No, the tone of voice, if I may, is get your great, fat, silk-encrusted ass back to the table counter and start talking before all of a sudden the peons rise up from the estancia and come and kill your ass. Thank you very much.
We worked very hard to try to change the culture of the Guild with respect to independent cinema, from sort of that's low rent and amateur hour and beneath our dignity to, you know, this is where the interesting work is being done and it's also the future of our Guild.
There's only one way to negotiate, and that is to negotiate hard. You've got to make them either afraid of you or respect you, or both. When they get uncomfortable is when they move. At the moment, they're making us and everybody else uncomfortable. Most multinational corporations are concerned only for themselves and their bottom line, at the cost of everybody who works for them, whether they're farmers or ditch diggers or writers or registered nurses or school teachers. People get that now. They get it.
I worked with various people at the Guild on a low-budget agreement. Sometimes when you're doing a project that's not a studio project, that's much lower rent, what Guild minimum is equal to the entire budget of the project. So the low-budget agreement was a way that we could write the films we wanted to write, get them made with the budgets that those kinds of imaginations would support, and still be part of our Guild.
Nothing really moved at all during all these rounds of negotiation until the CEO stepped in.
The Golden Globes were shut down. Those award shows are written by writers. Writers refused to not only write the show, but actors weren't going to go. They didn't go to the Golden Globes, and the Golden Globes ended up being this very simple announcement of who the winners were.
All right, best performance by an actor in a television series, comedy, or musical. Alec Baldwin, 30 Rock.
People did not go on stage and make their speeches. The actors didn't show up for it. The Academy Awards in 2008 were in jeopardy.
It only ended when Iger's Oscar telecast was threatened. And that's when he started to get very interested. And that's when we met with the CEOs.
The Directors Guild has never struck in its entire history, 75, 80 years now, except for a few minutes, I believe, in 1987.
I don't think a union should negotiate when another union is on strike in the same business. The things that they were thinking of negotiating for were things that didn't matter to us. They weren't going in there negotiating for the internet. They were negotiating for some pension amounts that had nothing to do with what we cared about.
Yes, it did have the appearance of coming in the middle of the WGA negotiations and finishing them.
The DGA often is not the weakest union, but it is the one that the AMPTP would go to set a pattern.
I don't think they consulted with us while they were negotiating. They consulted with John Wells. They weren't negotiating with people who were actually leading the strike.
The directors have this attitude that, you know, they are the kings of the roost and tend to be in collaboration with the producers. Writers are kind of these good-hearted people who are very idealistic, but together. And the actors are good-hearted people who are idealistic and completely disorganized.
What I think gets ignored in that formulation is that the leverage that the DGA had in its negotiation was given to them by us.
You know, the DGA is a different kind of union. Many of the members are highly dependent on being hired by a smaller group of directors, right? So you have, you know, all the ADs and all those various positions. And traditionally, DGA has had, let's say, a closer relationship with the studios than, say, the writers or the actors.
In a funny way, the DGA cut in and began negotiations in a way that I think showed a lack of elementary union solidarity.
So we went back into negotiation with the DGA template. We improved it. We didn't improve it enough, in my opinion, but it was becoming clear that the membership was interested in having the strike end, was interested in going back to work.
The DGA was, in large measure, doing our negotiating for us.
As soon as I saw what they got, I said, we can't maintain a strike after this. We can't. It's just, this is over for us.
We knew it was a shit deal. That if we took that deal, they had won, and we had spent 100 days marching for nothing.
I want to change entertainment completely. I'm just going whatever route I have to go to make it happen. I mean, there's augmented reality, there's touchscreen content, there's all kinds of things that just aren't being used that are available. See, technology moves really fast, and entertainment does not look forward. Entertainment in the food business, right? What can we sell to you today? But tech looks forward.
Over the next few years, you're going to either live in an Apple house or a Microsoft house or a Google house. You're going to walk into that house and everything's going to know you're there because you've got your iPhone on you. And you're going to have 150-inch screens painted on the walls. And we can watch that on our 110-inch wall. And we can have the aspect ratio and the sound quality that makes us feel like we're sitting at the Cinerama Dome. Yet I got my family with me.
We don't need to port over the old ways into the new way. It's so new and so earth-shatteringly strange and different that you don't need another network on a website. Every website is a potential network.
Will the studios exist and the networks exist as we go forward? Yes. But they're not the only players even today. Their monopoly, both on shelf space, capital, and distribution, has come to an end.
The strike is over.
Yay!
Could you say that again? Memberships of the Writers Guild of America West and Writers Guild of America East today voted overwhelmingly in favor of lifting the restraining order and ending our 100-day strike which began on November 5th. 3,775 writers turned out in Los Angeles and New York to cast ballots for fax-in proxies. 92.5% voting in favor of ending the work stoppage. The vote was 3,492 yes to 283 no. Our membership has voted. Writers can go back to work.
Being a writer, to me, being a writer, is about having an idea where that trajectory is. You may never hit that spot, but you have an idea where you're going and you've learned something along the way that may even be better than the trajectory. But if we lose that, and we lose the idea of that, and we lose the attention span of that, we are doomed.
It was a bad deal.
They fought as hard as they could for, 100 days, with a lot of support from actors. I don't know what was really accomplished. Electronic sell-through. There's no money in my pocket from electronic sell-through. In order for us to ever really participate meaningfully in new media, there'll have to be another job action. I just don't know how that's going to happen. So did there have to be one? Yes. Did that do the trick? I don't think it did.
We didn't get the minimums we wanted. We didn't get all kinds of other things. But we wanted to ensure the one thing that for us was absolutely vital in the strike, which was, you can call it new media, you can call it broadcast, you can call it cable, you can call it internet, you can call it streaming, you can call it set-top box, but somebody writes it, you're making money off of it, it appears on a screen, it moves, and it's under our jurisdiction.
People were saying at the time, look, this internet is nothing. I mean, we struck over a $10 check, and well, those $10 checks are today $20,000 checks. Now as distribution moves to Amazon and it moves to Netflix, that money is only going to become to writers because of the fact that we went on strike in 2007.
I mean, raising the minimum worked in a finite market where the only thing that mattered was America and American production and American output. They couldn't make a movie unless they had a Writers Guild writer. Today, capital is all over the world, all over the world.
That strike was the hardest thing I ever did in my life. I don't want to ever have to do anything like it again. However, in looking back on it, it had to be done. There was no way that that group of management negotiators were going to give us what we got. Now, I'm going to get residuals online, and I didn't know that before.
One side you could say is that they succeeded in what one writer referred to as getting a toe in the door on digital. Not a whole foot, a toe. And that makes a difference because now they can negotiate for a better piece of digital. How much they got, not so good. But the other side of the strike was about unity. And for the union as a whole, it was a really important strike. Some people say, who gives a crap about unity? What we care about is the bottom line. But I think ultimately, as the Guild moves forward, those ideas of TV writers and film writers coming together, the Writers Guild East and the Writers Guild West coming together, older writers and younger writers coming together, that was a good moment for the union in terms of a sense of collective vision.
In conclusion, when they ask you years from now what it was we went on strike for, I want you to quote Robert Town, and you say, "The future, Mr. Gitz, the future. What do we want?"
When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble force of one? But the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity even amid the wonders we have made. But the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. They have taken untold millions that they never toiled to earn. But without our brains and muscles, not a single wheel can turn. We can break their haughty power, gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. 'Cause in our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of armies magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old.